Hello guys, how are you doing today? I hope all of you are fine. Guys, today we are going to start our course of Pakistan studies, and our first chapter is economic development, and the first SLO of this chapter is to describe the different kinds of industries in Pakistan. Uh, Before we move towards the kinds of industries, you should know what's an industry. An industry is a group of productive enterprises or organizations that produce or supply goods, services, or source of income. So, an industry is an enterprise or an organization that produce and supply goods and services or source of income. An industry is basically a collection of firms, or you can say that industry is a collection of similar firms that produce similar goods, right? So it's an organization, it's a collection of firms that produce goods, supply goods or services or source of income. Industry is a major source for economic development. How many of you know what's an economic development? Economic development, it's the structural change in economy. It's different from economic growth, which means just the increase in income. Economic growth means increase in income, while economic development means a structural change in economy. And industry holds a very important place in economic development. If you will in Pakistan, if you will see, almost 64% of our GDP is produced by industrial sector. So it's very important to understand the industry in order to understand the economic development of Pakistan. An industry is a collection of firms or similar firms, right? And that produce similar goods or services, right? Now let's move towards the kinds of industry. First is small scale industry. A small scale industry is operated mainly with hired labor, usually employing 10 to 50 persons. So a small scale industry is a small industry that produce goods at small scale with limited employees. That's, generally speaking, there are 10 to 50 persons working in a small scale industry with very low capital. Almost you can say zero level of capital is employed in small scale industries, and it's primarily run by manpower, and it produces very small level of goods. So it uses small level of input, that's small level of employees and small level of capital, and it produces very small scale goods, right? So small scale industry is a small industry. Next is the cottage industry. Cottage industry is an industry wholly or primarily carried by members of family, either as a whole or part-time occupation. For example, there are number of people, or especially in our area, women are producing number of goods, handicrafts at their home and selling them. That's an example of a cottage industry, because the family members are employed in that industry. If an industry is run by the members of family, that's called a cottage industry. Again, in cottage industry, there are very small level of employees are employed. Few people are employed, usually the family members or the members of a same family with very limited capital. Again, cottage industry is producing goods at very small scale, but it's very important because it provides employment to a huge number of employees. Now let's move towards the large scale industry. A large scale industry is an industry which requires huge infrastructure and manpower with influx of capital. A large scale industry is employing a huge amount of manpower as well as a huge amount of capital, and it produces a huge amount of goods. Large scale industry uses a huge amount of input and produce a huge amount of output. So a large scale industry is run at a large level. It requires more infrastructure, it requires more manpower, it requires more capital, and it produces more goods. So large scale industry is a large industry. So these were the three main categories of industries: small scale, cottage, and large scale. I hope all of you understand what are small scale industries, what are large scale industries, and what are cottage industries, and what is an industry itself. Now, your task is what's difference between small scale industry and cottage industry. Both of them are using very small level of capital and small level of employees, and what's the difference between these two. Thank you for joining. Take care. One thing more, you have to submit this assignment before Wednesday. Thank you for joining. Take care. Goodbye.